We're going to begin by making some family files in this lesson, and so we're going to create a very simple table for our first family file. You have a picture of what that table should look like and the dimensions within the instructions for creating the family file. Here are the dimensions right here for the table: 3 feet by 3 feet by 18 feet tall, 18 inches tall rather. So let's begin. The first thing that you want to do is start a new family. Whoops, I did that too quickly. A new family file. And we have all sorts of family templates, RFT files that we can pick from. This is going to be a piece of furniture. So I'm going to pick the furniture RFT file template, hit open. And we are looking at the top view of what where the table is going to be, and we have two reference planes. If you select the first reference plane, it's the center of the view with the left-right reference planes that we could view. So if I went to the right elevation, then I'd see that side of the plane. If I went to the left elevation, I'd see that side of the plane. And then we have center, front, and back. Same thing, front, back. So these are planes so that they take up three-dimensional space. We're looking down on two rectangles intersecting each other so they look like lines. I'm going to, instead of making this the center of the table, I'm going to define that as the corner of the table. So I'm going to create a new reference plane because I want to see that in all views. And I'm going to define the reference plane as the same height as the first one that I have by just looking for those blue dashed lines that show me. And then I want to name that new reference plane and call it table width. So what happens when I select that is I see table width as a name. I'm going to do the same thing. New reference plane. Make it the same length as the other reference plane and rename that one table length. Now that I have these two reference planes, I can use the four corners to define my table size, and I can set the reference planes to the distances I want them to be from the locked reference planes that we started with. So I want that to be 3 feet, and I want that to be 3 feet in that direction as well. When I create an extrusion allows me to create a shape and then extrude it a thickness. So if we looked at the dimensions again, it's supposed to be 2 inches thick for the tabletop. So go back to our Revit view. So I want to set this to 2 inches for an extrusion. And then, I did that a little bit too quickly, so I'm going to delete those lines and start over again. Create a rectangle and have it connect to those reference points. And right now when I see all those locks, I actually want to lock them all down. So family files we do want to constrain quite a bit. And then we still see the extrusion end is set to 2 inches, so that's perfect. We hit the green check box, get out of the check mode. Let's take a look at what this gave us if we look at the front view. It looks like our view is not where we want it to be, so it's zoomed to fit. And we can see that our tabletop is on the floor. This is the reference level, that's the 0 level or floor level in our project. So whatever level you're on, if you're on the first floor, then the table is going to go right on the floor like that, the tabletop. We want the legs to go on the floor and the tabletop to be above. So I'm going to create a new reference plane. And this reference plane is going to be renamed table height. And I want to set the table height to 18 inches. Now I can select this table, and because I have this table, this reference plane labeled, I can select the table and edit the work plane. When I hit edit work plane, I can change it from level, which is the original level, to table height as a new work plane. That brings the table up, but it brings the bottom of the table up instead of the top. So I want to fix that by changing my extrusion end to -2 inches instead of 2 inches. And now the tabletop is attached to that reference plane. If I want the table thickness here to remain 2 inches, I want to lock that as well. So I'm going to annotate add a dimension that goes from the reference plane to the bottom of the table, and then when I see that dimension, I'll see a lock that I can lock. Okay. So now if I decide to change the height of the table is going to go with it, and the thickness of the table is going to remain 2 inches. So let's go back to our top view or reference plane. Next, we're going to create the table legs, and in order to do that I also have to create some constraints for them. So I'm going to create a few more reference planes. So you have reference plane, this time I'm going to use a 2-inch offset, and that 2-inch offset is going to allow me to set the edge of the table 2 inches in from the edge of the the edge of the table legs, rather, 2 inches in from the edge of the table. And then I'm going to click on the line I just drew with the same 2-inch offset. This is going to set the table width. And I'm going to do that all the way around. So because of that 2-inch offset, it allows me to create a line 2 inches in from the original reference plane, and then click on the line you just created to create another line 2 inches in from that one, and do that until you have defined the table leg offset in from the edge of the table, and then also the table leg width, because that's essentially what we're doing with those two reference planes. I'm going to block some dimensions again. So I'm going to go to Annotate, Aligned, and click a dimension between these two and place it. Then between these two dimensions and place that. Essentially pinning down all of those dimensions. So I want to have those remain 2 inches all the way around. So I'm going to now go in and lock all those dimensions. And then I also want to lock the width of the legs. So I'd go back into Annotate, Align Dimension, and let's create another set of dimensions between the two inside extension lines, or not extension lines, but reference planes. And I will lock those as well. So the first 2-inch is how far in the table legs are going to be. I locked that. The second reference plane is how wide the table legs are going to be, and I locked all that. We don't obviously have to add any on these two sides, because this locks for both this side and this locks for this side and that side, and so forth. Okay. Now I want to create the 4 table legs, and I'm going to have to do them one at a time, and I'll explain why. Every time you create a new extrusion, you have to make sure you're explicitly locking it to each of the reference planes. And then when you hit the checkbox, we're also going to need to go into a side view and lock it here as well. So see, it created a table leg that was only 2 inches tall. I want to grab the top of the table leg. When it highlights the bottom of the table, it will give me a lock, so I can lock that top of the table leg to the bottom of the table. I also want to lock the bottom of the table leg to the reference plane. I'm going to have to do that for each table leg. So I would go back to my reference level and create a new extrusion using the rectangle tool, lock it, and I'm just going to keep going here in this direction, and then I'll switch views and then lock the heights of the table legs to the bottom of the table and the reference plane. So I might as well stay here and finish doing all these first. You're probably wondering, why doesn't she just mirror it or copy it? It actually ends up taking about the same amount of time, because you still have to take the time of moving those lines and locking them to the reference planes. So now I know all of these extrusions are locked this way. I now have to go to our front or back or left elevation, whatever works, find those table legs we just created, and we also need to lock them this way. Now we could have created all the table legs as one extrusion. That would work. But if we do that, then the table legs will all extrude at the same time, and that might be fine. We might want to do it that way. But for now, I want to show you how important it is to to control them this way. The other thing is later on we're going to add some more embellishments to this, and we're going to do some tapers. So it's going to be better for these to be individual extrusions rather than all one extrusion. All right, so let's take a look at what we have. If we look at the 3D view, we now have a table with 4 legs. And if I were to go, let's look at the Views tab and close Hidden and open up the reference plane level, and then we'll tile the views. So I have the 3D view here. I have the top reference plane, and then I've got a view over here that we're going to bring this file, family file, into this one. What I want to show you is if I grab this table width reference plane and I start to drag it, you see that the table size changes. If I do the same thing with the table length, drag it, the table size changes. And so far things are behaving. If we didn't have these locked constraints, I'm going to show you what happens to these two if I remove those constraints. And then I grab this table length here, or width rather, pull it in this direction. You see what happens to those 2 table legs is the edge of the table legs on the inside remain at their start position because we didn't say to make sure that that reference plane stays 2 inches from this reference plane at all times. So it's going to stay exactly where we left it because it's not constrained to anything. As soon as we set that constraint, however, so let's go back, let's put that constraint back in there, annotate, and we lock those constraints. We go back in and we change the table length, and it's behaving again. Okay, so that's really important to constrain your model properly. All right, so let's bring this into this model here, which I've just got some simple thing in here. I actually started a new file called My Initials Family Assignment RVT, and you're going to do the same and save it in the root of your family folder on the R drive. That way I don't have to go searching for all your families. All the families you create you're going to dump in here so I can take a look at them. So let's minimize that. And what I want to do is import this family into this file, but first I've got to rename it. So I'm going to do a Save As Family, and this is a piece of furniture. So I should go under My S Drive AED 220. You're going to do the same. You go under Families, Furniture, and I'm going to call this My Initials Simple Table. And I might get a warning here because I think I have a simple table file already, but that's okay. Yeah, because we're going to replace it. So then once a simple table has been named, this is going to be the family, I can import it into the RVT file that I'm working on. So I'd select the family file and just hit Load into Project. That's one way to bring it in. And there it is. Okay, so there's our table, the same table that we have here. If we select it and look at the settings that the table has, it's got just the level it's controlled on or what it's on, and under Edit Type we have very few things that we could edit. What if we wanted to change the size of the table, for instance? So in the next video we're going to look at adding some parameters that we can change as type parameters, and we're also going to add some instance parameters that we can change. So I'll hit stop and go ahead and take a look at the next video.